Alright, in this video we're going to start looking at some of the particle effects that come inherent to the CryEngine. Things that we can basically just drag and drop for the most part. Now, certainly the particle engine is extremely deep in CryEngine, but really getting fully into particles is beyond the scope of this introductory course. We will revisit it and see some other things that we can do in later videos, but I wanted to start out with one that just, like I said, is basically drag and drop. So we're going to maneuver to wherever you have your forest scene set up, and we're going to create some falling leaves. So in our roll-up bar, under the first tab with Objects, we're going to go to Entity. We're going to open that up and come down to, you'll probably see something like this. Come down to Particles, open that up, and we have this particle effect here. Now, I'm going to make sure that my grid snaps are off, but my follow terrain is on. The reason I'm doing this is if you've ever worked in any other 3D program, if you've noticed that sometimes you're looking at something you drag into the scene, and from this angle it looks like it's right where you want it, but then when you move to a different perspective, it's actually like a mile away. Well, that's real annoying, and this will help us drag this in. So we drag in and let go. Now you can see that particle effect is following the terrain. So we will drop that there for the moment. And now that we've got it where we kind of want it, we'll maneuver it a little bit here. And yeah, that's probably a pretty good area. We'll kind of put it in here where these are. Alright, so we have our particle effect. So before we go any further, let's do a little bit of organization. We have particle effect 01, but if we get a bunch of these going, that's not really going to tell us a lot down the road. So let's change our naming convention a little bit. And we'll say particle effect leaves 01. Oops, 01. So that's fine. Now we're going to go over to our Layers tab. We're going to make sure that we have our leaves layer picked. And when we come back to our Entity tab, you can see that because we already had it picked before, we have particle effect leaves. But if it had been on main, we would then be able to click on this and put it where we want it. So now we have all of that set up. That's awesome. Now we actually just have to create some leaves. So we're going to go up to DB for our database. And all of particle effects and a ton of other stuff in CryEngine comes in libraries. So depending on what you're doing, you can just bring in a library and get what you want, and on a small level like this where it's a single level and not very big, that would probably be fine. But if you're working bigger or on multiple projects, you might want a library that's specific to what you're doing. So we're going to create a new library here. Oops, let me cancel. We're going to go to Particles and create a new library. And let's call this one Island. And now you can see we have Island and a bunch of other stuff that I was fiddling around with earlier. But we have Island. So that's great. Now we need to actually load a library to Island. So we're going to open this up and see what we have. And since we're already in our Particles tab up here, the libraries it's going to give us will be particular to particles. In this case, we want environment effects, but you could easily be doing water, waterfall, explosions, smoke and fire, any of those. But in this case, we want environment effects. So we'll pick OK. And it's not going to let me do that because I've loaded a duplicate environment before. So let's get rid of that. If you have one you want out of there, if you're reorganizing or something like that, you can load this up and remove the library. So now let's try again. We'll go to Island, go to our file, pick environment effects, and it loads right up. And you can see under here we have leaves. We can open that up. We'll choose falling leaves. And since we already have our entity over here, we can come up here and put assign item to selected objects. If you didn't already have that selected, just make sure you go in and select it and then come back and do that. So now we've got that assigned, and as you can see, we have some leaves falling. We can bring this up, put it more where they're going to be falling from, and you can see that we have this all set up and ready to go. Awesome. But it's not going to do that all over. It's an area effect, and you can see it's only covering an area about the size of these 3 trees. So if we want more, what do? Well, that's pretty easy. We already have it selected. So we're going to come over here, put this roughly where we want the new one, and we're going to hit, oops, I did that very wrong. Oh well. Let me try that again here in a second. Anyway, now we have our second one, which we will rename Leaves 02. And then we will wander over here and probably put one here. So, got 01 selected over here again. We're going to put our mouse about where we want it, hit Control V. I'm sorry, Control C. Why aren't you being good for me? Well, I've made a couple of copies here, but they didn't just pop up where I wanted them to, which they should have done. Alrighty, well, first of all, let's get rid of these. And let's give it one more try and just see if we were being goofy. So we're going to put our mouse over here, Control C. We're going to select our particle effect. Put our mouse over here, Control C, and there we go. Now it's behaving. Click to let it go in the area, and then reposition it exactly where you want it. As you can see, it's not really exactly where we wanted it. Kind of bring this over here, bring it down a bit. That's pretty good. All right. Lost my naming convention. It must not have hit enter. So that's Leaves 01. And our new one is Leaves 03. And now we're set pretty good. Now you can certainly go add these to wherever else you have trees on the layer. I'm not going to bother doing that here right now. But that gets us a very basic setup with a particle effect. And if we hop into game mode quick and hurt ourselves, we can see that we've got our particle leaves falling very nicely. And we're all set up. And it was something that was just in the can there for us to use. Now later on we will get into using what we have on hand here to create a particular effect. But this is a great way to get some things going very quickly and very easily without having to know a ton about effects. So that should do it for this video. We will move on to the next one.